Back in 2011, I was living in a house in El Paso, Texas for a year with my two sons. It was a nice place with a huge backyard for our dogs and three BRs, two dens, and a two-car garage. Great place for the price I was renting it. Also, the landlord lived almost across the street from me, so he was always close by if needed. Shortly after moving in, a matter of weeks, I was in my bedroom watching TV and unwinding from a long day. I was unemployed at the time and had received a severance check from my ex-employer and was living off of that while I was job searching. My BR was right across the hall from my youngest son's BR, and my older son had his BR next door to mine as he was disabled. And there were times I would have to get up in the middle of the night if he needed to use the bathroom. Late that night, I heard singing coming through the AC vents and assumed it was my son's girlfriend, who had just moved in with us and had a great singing voice. I chalked it up to that and told myself that I would speak to my son about it in the morning. The following morning, I asked my son about it with his GF there, and he told me that he thought the singing was coming from my room. They thought maybe I was watching something on TV and just turned up theirs to block out the song. Weird. This house was an older house, built in 1959, and built in an L shape with one side of the L having bedrooms and bathrooms, and the other side had the den, dining room, kitchen, another room that could be used as an office or a spare bedroom, and ended with the garage. All doors and windows had wrought iron. It started that when we would leave the house, we would lock the wrought iron door going into the house from the garage, and many times upon our return, the door would be unlocked. The same happened when we were in the house. That door would remain unlocked while we were all inside the house. But many times when I would have to go to the garage, the door would be locked. Also, this house had been renovated. It had new tile, carpet, cabinets in the kitchen and such. But certain rooms had these old-style push-button light switches. They would be lit if the lights in the room were off, and then you would push it, and the switch would make a loud, audible double click. Sounded kind of like ka-chuck, and the lights would turn on. In the hallway, the guest bathroom's lights started turning on at different times of the night, but only when we were awake. We could be watching TV in the den, and you would hear the click, and the light in the bathroom would be on. No one was around when it did this, and we could find no reason for it to be doing this. I remember shortly after we had moved in, I had a brother over to help me connect all of my devices to connect a new Wi-Fi modem. After he got done getting everything set up, it was dark outside, and he asked where the bathroom was. I told him, first door on the left down the hallway. I heard him go in, press the light switch, ka-chuck, and as I heard him relieving himself, the house was not that big of a house. I heard the loud ka-chuck again, and then my brother screamed out, "What the asterisk at K?" He flushed and came out. We told him we had all heard it and told him that this was happening on a kind of regular basis. As we were still settling in at this house, I bought a touch-sensitive lamp that I could place on the table next to my son's hospital bed, so that those times that he called me late at night, I could just go in and tap the light and have light in his room. From off, if you touch the light once, it would light dimly or low. The second touch would be brighter, medium. A third touch would put the light at its brightest setting. And of course, the fourth touch would turn it off again. Well, after about a week that this light was there, it started to turn on in the middle of the night. But it always seemed to turn on between 12 a.m. and 2 a.m. And it was always on at the second medium setting, never the low or the high setting. There was no way that my disabled son would have been able to reach that light as it was to the left of his bed and out of range of his hands and arms. He has had limited range of motion in his arms after his car accident. This light turned on every night without fail. There were several times that I would try to stay awake just so that I could catch the light turning on and run into the room to catch our invisible culprit. It never worked. I could be sitting up in bed with my door open watching for the hallway to brighten from the light being turned on. I was never able to catch it. As soon as I would start to doze off and my eyes would close, I would snap awake and the light would already be on. At this time, I downloaded a Ghost Hunters app on my iPhone to test some things out. That night, I was walking around the house trying to get EMF readings. They were highest in my son's room. My brother was over again that night and told me it was probably picking up the electrical current from the wiring in the walls. So we decided to kill all power to the house at the main fuse box and to check the room again. Even with the power turned off, the EMF readings were high in the guest bedroom and highest again in my disabled son's room. One night, I had my girlfriend staying over, and that night after we had had our fun, we opened the door to my room so if my son called, I could hear him. We went to sleep. I woke up to her screaming, yelling that someone was at the door. I looked, and sure enough, there was a shadow figure at the door. I'm getting goosebumps typing this. I jumped out of the bed as I saw it move to the left of the door and ran into the hallway. From there, I saw the shape go into the bathroom, the same one that had the light being turned on by itself. I turned on the light, my hand shaking, and the room was empty. I could not get my GF to go back to sleep, and she packed up her stuff and left. The next day, I decided to go across the street to speak with my landlord and tell him the things that were happening. It was then that he told me that he had bought the house after the woman that had lived there had passed on. She died in the house. And he bought it and turned it into a rental property, and I was his first tenant at that house. After I told him all of the things that were happening, he told me that he was willing to rent a video camera that we could set up in my son's room. I told him maybe, that we would just see how things progressed as no one had been harmed, and whatever was in that house did not seem malevolent in any way. As weeks turned into months, and each night passing meant me waking up in the middle of the night to turn off the light in my son's room, as it would wake me up eventually. The doors around the house would unlock themselves. The light in the bathroom would turn on off, etc. We kind of got used to it. One night I was asleep in my room. I had the AC on and the ceiling fan on in my room, as El Paso summer nights can be hot as hell. Anyway, I was asleep and was awakened by the sound of the vertical blinds knocking against themselves. I wrote it off to the air being moved by the fan and the AC. I closed my eyes and was just about to doze off again when I felt the hair on the back of my neck prick up. I closed my eyes tighter and told myself, "Don't look." As soon as I thought that, I felt breathing on my right ear, and as plain as day, something whispered "Mother" into my ear. I yelled and jumped out of bed and turned on my lights, and nothing. There was no one there. As time moved on, I started dating another woman with 3 kids, and when things started to get serious between her and I converted the room that could be used as an office to a spare bedroom with a set of bunk beds and another small bed for this GF's youngest daughter. As they would come over and started spending weekends with us, they started experiencing things too, mostly the shadow figure. The little girl was the one that would see this the most, get scared, and come into our room and jump into bed with us. All of us had experiences with the shadow, as we started to call it. There were times I would be watching TV in the den, and I would feel the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I would spin around only to catch a dark streak moving away, and in a second it was gone. Anyway, as our 1-year lease was coming close to an end, I contacted the El Paso Paranormal Society and asked if they could come out and check out the house. I called them, sent an email via their website, and never got an answer. My GF and I got married. This did not last, but that's another story. And we ended up buying a house in the same neighborhood, only about 3 blocks from this one. As we were almost done with our move, I was finally contacted by the El Paso Paranormal Society. Needless to say, they were anxious to come check out the house and wanted to set up an appointment about 2 weeks from the day of their call. I told them we were already moving to a new place and that we would not be living there any longer by the time they would be able to come out. So the guy I spoke to told me, make sure that the last thing that I should do when I leave this house for the final time would be to announce to whatever was in that house that it needed to stay there and that it was not allowed to follow me. His telling me this gave me chills, but I said sure. Okay. That night, as me and my GF were getting the last things out of that house, we did a final walkthrough, making sure all the lights were off, the doors locked, etc. The landlord had already been over to inspect and just asked us to leave a light on in the house. We chose to leave the light on in the kitchen as it had a window with vertical blinds that looked out onto the driveway of the house. This way, it would seem as if someone was home. As my wife and I got into each of our own cars and had our windows down and were speaking to each other, I remembered what the ghost hunter guy had told me. I yelled over to my wife to hold on a sec. I got out of my car, unlocked and opened the front door and stood in the doorway and said, "Whatever is in this house, this is now your house. You are not allowed to follow us. You must stay here." I backed out of the house, closed and locked the door, and got back into my car. I yelled over to my wife, "Let's go," when all of a sudden, right in front of both of us, We saw one of the vertical blinds in the kitchen window move sideways as if someone was looking out. Getting chills again. We looked at each other and said, let's get the F asterisk at K out of here, and we left. I almost left out one of the creepiest things. There was one morning that I awoke very early, like 4:30-ish, and that damn light was on in my son's room. Again! I always tried to catch the light and turn it off before it woke my son as due to his brain injury. Sleep was very important for him to have. As I walked in quietly to turn off the light, I was pissed that this had been going on so long and nightly. I tapped the light twice to turn it off and started to walk out of the room. I stopped at the foot of my son's hospital bed and said out loud, if there is something here, turn on that fucking light. And almost immediately, the light turned on. I did not realize that my son, who I thought was asleep at the time, woke up. The look of terror on his face shook me to my core. To this day, I still have nightmares about that morning and the look on his face. After that morning, I unplugged that lamp and put it away in the garage. Still, like I said, there were other things that occurred here, but this post would be easily 10x what I posted to even begin to touch on most of it. The house is real. It is located at 2921 First Street in EPTX. You can Google it and see it looks like a normal house. You can even see the kitchen window that is close to the driveway that had that single vertical blind pushed sideways that last night there.